Good morning. Today we are going to start a new part of our course, which is flow of fund and the main four economic accounts that's gonna be used in order to understand the flow of fund table. We are going to today to start with the first account, which is the national accounts. Because economic sectors interact, a change in one sector will affect the other sectors. So we have to study the relationship between the four main sectors in the economy. What are the four main sectors? Number 1, the private sector. Number 2, government. Number 3, banks. And finally, the rest of the world. The activities of these four sectors are reflected in 4 macroeconomic accounts. With respect to the first sector, which is the private sector, it's mainly reflected in the national accounts table. Or is known as national income and the product accounts. With respect to the second sector, which is the government, all transactions or all sources of income received by the government and its uses are reflected in an account known as government account. Number 3, with respect to the third sector, which is the banking system, it's reflected in an account known as monetary survey. And finally, with respect to transactions between the country and the rest of the world in terms of purchasing and selling of goods and services, gifts from other countries, selling and purchasing of financial transactions, this is going to be reflected in an account known as the balance of payments. Why do we study the interrelations among the accounts? As we said before, that a change in one sector will be reflected in all other sectors, as each one of them tell a part of the same story. They represent an integrated system. So this system should be analyzed totally or on an aggregate level rather than individually. So we are not going to focus on each sector alone, but we are going to focus on all of them together. In order to understand the 4 macroeconomic accounts and to use them in the development of the country and to increase economic growth rate, formulate policy recommendation, we have to understand what's meant by accounting identity. Accounting identity means total outlays equals total inflows. Total outlays and total inflows of real resources and financial resources, or in other words, of production and money. So we can write this in another form, which is known as budget constraint. The budget constraint of any sector means that the total production should be equal to the use of resources. Production of the sector must be equal to the use of its resources. Okay, now we have to understand what's budget constraint in case of closed economy and in case of open economy. First, in case of closed economy. Closed economy means that there is no trade or international relations with the rest of the world. This means that the country is going to produce based on the available resources. So in this case, the accounting identity of this country or the budget constraint of this country is going to be represented as Y, which is total production, equals consumption plus investment, which is the use of resources. This means that expenditure of the economic agents couldn't exceed the total production. So this is budget constraint in case of closed economy. What about in case of open economy? In case of open economy, the total resources of the country, which will be used in the production, are equal to production plus import from abroad. So total available resources will be domestic production Y and import from abroad M. What about the use of these resources? These resources or the country's production will be used to satisfy needs, which are represented in the form of consumption expenditure and investment expenditure plus selling and buying of goods and, selling of goods and services to the rest of the world, which is exports. So total expenditure of the country is represented as C plus I plus X. So the budget constraint in case of open economy can be written as Y plus M, which is total resources, equals C plus I plus X, which is the use of resources. By rearranging the equation, so we can write it as Y equals C plus I plus X minus M. Now we would like to understand this equation in more details. First, we would like to know the relationship between domestic economy and the current account. So we have to talk about the relationship between absorption and the current account. In this case, we are going to talk about what's absorption and what is the relationship between absorption and the current account. And in case number 2, we would like to study the relationship between saving and investment. So we are going to understand the meaning of saving investment gap, and then study the relationship between saving investment gap and the current account. So we are going to start with the first part, which is absorption and current account. What's meant by absorption? Absorption means total domestic demand. So A, which stands for absorption, equals C plus I, which is consumption expenditure and investment expenditure. So we can rewrite the budget constraint in case of closed economy to be Y equals A, or domestic production equals absorption. So absorption can only increase in only one situation, which is increasing domestic production. While in case of open economy, if the country would like to increase, in case of open economy, we can rewrite the equation or the budget constraint in case of open economy and replace C plus I with A. So budget constraint will be Y equals A plus X minus M, or domestic production equals absorption plus net export. We can rewrite this equation to be Y minus A equals X minus M. Y minus A represents domestic production minus domestic uses of these goods and services, which is the absorption level. when A is greater than Y, so we are going to demand more resources from abroad. As a result, M must exceed X and vice versa. In this case, as A exceeds Y, this means that demand for domestic products exceeds domestic production. So we are going to witness a deficit in the current account, because we are going to import more or export less. So this is the relationship between absorption and current account. So once again, absorption means domestic demand for a product, whether in the form of consumption or investment. The relationship between absorption and current account is that if absorption exceeds domestic production, so we are going to import from abroad or decrease our exports. As a result, the current account is going to witness a deficit. Part number 2. What's saving investment balance and what is the relationship between investment and current account? From its name, saving investment balance, which means it's the difference between savings and investments. Returning to the case of the closed economy, where y equals c plus I. And as we know that y minus c equals s, or your income minus consumption is going to be savings. So if we rewrite the equation y minus c minus I equals 0, we can replace y minus c with s. Once again, y equals c plus I. Then y minus c minus I equals 0. We can replace this part with s. So s minus I equals 0. This means that in closed economy, domestic investment can't exceed the level of domestic savings. Domestic investment in case of closed economy should be equal to domestic savings. So if you would like to increase investment, you have to increase domestic savings. What about the case of open economy? In case of open economy, we are going to rearrange the equation y minus c minus I equals x minus m, and then we are going to replace y minus c with s. So the new equation is s minus I, which is saving investment balance, equals x minus m, which is current account balance. If investment exceeds savings, this means that you have to borrow from abroad. So there is a deficit in the current account. Okay. So we can rewrite the equation in another form, as in case of open economy, investment will not rely only on domestic savings, but is going to rely on foreign savings or borrowing from abroad. So we can write the current account deficit as x minus m plus SF, which stands for foreign savings. In another way, as we said before, that if I exceeds S, so we are going to borrow from abroad. As a result, the current account is going to witness a deficit. This deficit can be financed by foreign savings. So we are going to rearrange the equation so that x minus m plus SF equals 0. This means that x minus m equals negative SF, which is foreign savings. And from previous equation, S minus I equals x minus m. X minus m equals negative SF. So we are going to replace x minus m with negative SF. After rearranging the equation, so S plus SF equals I. This is domestic savings. And this is foreign savings. So if you would like to increase investment, you can increase domestic savings or foreign savings. Okay, now we are going to move to the first account, which is the national account. National account is used to evaluate the economy's overall performance. This is the form of the national account. It consists of two main parts. Part number 1, which is absorption. This is absorption. And part number 2, which is current account, and then we are going to add them together in order to find gross domestic product, gross national product, and gross national domestic income. So national accounts consists of the first part with absorption, and the second part which is current account. With respect to absorption, as we said before, it is the summation of consumption and investment. Consumption will be divided between two main parts: private consumption and government consumption. And with respect to investment, it's going to be divided between private investment and government investment. With respect to the second part, which is current account, is going to be the summation of export of goods and services, import of goods and services, income from abroad net, and the transfers from abroad net. By the way, this part will be found on the balance of payments as well. Okay. Consumption. Usually, these data are recorded annually. With respect to consumption, it could be final or intermediate. Final consumption, which is goods and services used by the final consumer, while intermediate are goods and services that will be used in the production of another product. What is going to be included is the final consumption. As from the definition of GDP, it is the market value of all final. So final consumption only will be included, whether for the private sector or the government. With respect to consumption by private sector, it is the consumption by households. So if you are going to add government consumption and the private consumption, this is going to be total consumption in the country. The same with respect to investment. Investment consists of two main parts, which is government plus private investment. Summation is total investment. Here's an example. Consumption by government is 39.6, while by the private sector it's 267.2. So we are going to add them together to find the value of total consumption, which is 306.8. With respect to investment, for the government it's 10.1, and for the private sector it's 90.1. So we are going to add them together to get the total investment of the country, which is 100.2. If you would like to calculate total domestic demand, it's going to be summation of consumption plus investment. So we are going to add consumption and investment together to find the value of total domestic demand or absorption. Part number 2. Current account. Export of goods and services. Export of goods and services are goods and services produced in one country and sold in another. They are recorded free on board at market prices. Free on board means that their prices include cost of manufacturing, loading, and shipping to the receiving country, and not including internal transportation. Export data can be found in national account table and in balance of payments table. And in case of balance of payments, it's going to be the summation of the merchandise of export plus services credit. And next lecture we are going to explain it in details. Imports. They are goods and services bought from one country and used in another. And also they are found in national account and balance of payment. Number 2. Income from abroad net. Net means that you are going to subtract receives minus paid. Income from abroad, this means interest rates. If you are going to buy bond in another country, so you are going to receive interest rate on these bonds. This is income received from abroad. If you are going to invest abroad, so you are going to get profit or return on your investment. This is going to be income received from abroad, and vice versa. Income from abroad is found in the national accounts table and in the balance of payments table. And finally, transfers from abroad. Transfers from abroad, such as grants from another country, such as remittances. It's also net, which means that you are going to subtract payment minus amount paid minus received. It also can be found in national account and balance of payments. We are going to use all of these data in order to calculate GDP, GNP, GNDI. GDP is calculated as consumption, investment, export, import. while GNP, GDP plus income from abroad. GNDI is GNP plus transfers from abroad. So returning back to our example, we are going to add exports minus imports to absorption to find GDP. And then we are going to add income from abroad to GDP to find GNP. And then we are going to add transfers from abroad to GNP to find GNDI. Usually, this table you are in any problem you can find only this number and this number and this number and this number, and you have to find all the missing values. Okay, so this table you have to calculate almost all of its items. So here you have to connect this part with balance of payments. And the rest is just summation of the given data. This is the end of our lecture for today. Next week, inshallah, we are going to complete the 3 other sectors or the 3 other accounts. Thank you.